Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome to this month's Logz.io webinar, where we'll be discussing the concept of building an ELK-based SOC with Logz.io security analytics. As always, the webinar is hosted by the customer success team at Logz.io, and as our name implies, we're here to help you be as successful as possible with Logz.io. We can help you with technical or product-related questions, training, implementation, and much more. There are a number of ways that you can get a hold of the customer success team, including the intercom chat icon in the lower right-hand side of the Logz.io web UI, where our support engineers are available 24/7 by 365 to answer any questions that you may have. You'll always be talking to a live human being and not a robot, and we don't outsource or offshore our support, so you can always be ensured that you'll be receiving the highest quality assistance. If you prefer not to work with us via chat, you'd also have the ability to raise a ticket with us by sending an email to help@Logz.io, or by visiting our documentation. You can engage in some self-service support at docs.logz.io. I also want to spend some time talking about the Logz.io Academy in the vein of self-service support. If after the webinar you find that you're left wanting more, we offer a self-paced online learning platform containing tutorials, webinar recordings, ebooks, how-to guides, and much more. All this is included with your Logz.io subscription if you're a current customer. So if this is something that sounds like it would be interesting to you, we definitely recommend checking out academy.logz.io. So to introduce myself, my name is Mike Neville O'Neill. I am a senior customer success engineer at Logz.io. I'm also joined by my colleague Tiago in customer success, who's going to be fielding the questions that you can input through the chat throughout the webinar. And we'll be taking some time at the end of the presentation to address those questions. I'm joined today by our co-founder and VP of product, Asaf, who's going to spend some time talking about our recently unveiled security analytics tool and where it resides within the security landscape and some of the problems that it can help you to solve. But before I turn things over to Asaf, I do want to launch a brief poll just to see where you guys are at in terms of the security tools that you may or may not leverage today. So I've just launched a poll that you guys can see now. Once we get to about 70 or 80% of response rate here, we'll go ahead and close it out. Almost at 70%. Give you just a couple more seconds to send in some responses. Okay, we'll go ahead and close out that poll and I'll share out the results. So it looks like a good deal of you are using either ELK or Logz.io to analyze your security data, as well as a traditional SIEM. And we'll talk a little bit throughout the presentation about some of the differences between a security analytics tool and a traditional SIEM, and how you can use the tool within a traditional incident response framework. So what I'd like to do now is hide those results and then turn things over to Asaf, who can spend some time running through the genesis of our security analytics tool. So over to you, Asaf.
Thanks for the intro, Mike. I'd like to do like a very quick introduction into Logz.io and what we do on the security side, and then turn it over back to Mike for a demo of the product and how to build a SOC with Logz.io. So what Logz.io provide? I mean, we're providing an ELK as a cloud service. We help organizations support their continuous operation efforts, resolve incidents faster when it comes to IT operation issues and also to security issues. We realized that the world of software development and pushing code to production has changed, and as opposed to a traditional way. Now it's being done more in a continuous way, which required a specific tool set to support it. So this is where we came up with our continuous operation. It relies on open source, it relies on advanced analytics, and a lot of other things that is required for that nature of things. We also realized that collecting logs is a very complex operation. The connectivity, the ability to parse them, the ability to make sense out of them, to normalize them. When you add security logs into the mix, talking to end devices, talking to network devices, devices that usually don't have a very simple or easy connectivity out, the complexity increases tremendously. And this is kind of like where we come into play with our security analytics. Problems that we see with legacy and traditional security analytics is, first of all, they're very complex and expensive, requiring a lot of maintenance, require a lot of professional services, setting them up, configuring them, setting up rules, and connecting to all the devices. They're also very ineffective, and they present a very poor signal-to-noise ratio. A lot of these systems are being used, just flood the user with security alerts and security incidents, and it's very hard to detect these days, kind of like what makes sense. The third thing is that it's not suited for the DevOps world. It's not suited for the development cycle. It's not suited for continuous integration, continuous deployment, and definitely not suited for the cloud. As we can see, and I'm sure you all know about the Target data breach that happened a few years ago. Target had all the security systems in place. They were actually getting alerts about stuff that was going on in their security environment, and they chose to ignore it. The reason they ignore it is because they were just flooded with a lot of events. Shows the ineffectiveness of these existing traditional tools. What is Logz.io security analytics? I'm sure you all know about us by now, and either using us for IT operation or using us in the DevOps realm. We've decided to build another application on top of what we have already, which is a security product. The security product, I'm going to go through it in the details, include a bunch of stuff that is actually needed to be able to secure an environment and troubleshoot security incidents in the exact same way that we offer ability to troubleshoot, detect, alert on operational incidents today. There are three things that we have in mind when we built it. First and foremost is make sure that the service that we have adheres to the continuous operation nature. It is based on open source. It's based on ELK. This is a product and a platform that a lot of DevOps engineers are familiar with, the ability to analyze incidents and the ability to drill in the data and correlate events is a known entity. We focused a lot on simplicity. Simplicity comes into play when it comes to deployment and integrations, which comes right out of the box with integrations to a lot of devices, and it obviously connect to all the cloud providers from a security standpoint. And we've enhanced it with our machine learning and our threat intelligence that we've implemented, especially for security incidents. So just to recap that, we see a lot of value of it being unified with operation, with the actual responsibility with security that lies these days more on the DevOps team and less on the security team when it comes to production security. The need to have a unified platform from a usability perspective, from a connectivity perspective, from a cost perspective is critical, and this is why we see the benefit of leveraging ELK for security. And we've seen in the poll that a lot of you are already using ELK for security. Building it on open source, make sure that this is a lower cost of ownership. It's very fast to implement, provides a familiar user interface that all of you are familiar with already, and creates the benefit of the actual quick progress of the open source and Kibana and Elasticsearch specifically. It's also very easy to set up and integrate. Those of you that use us for the IT operation, for the DevOps, know that we have tens of different connectors. We connect to Docker and Kubernetes and all the AWS and Azure and different programming languages. All of these now is being complemented with easy connectivity to network devices, to firewalls, different levels that they are, UTMs, and other security devices to be able to collect the data very, very easily. We've created an integration with threat intelligence. Threat intelligence are databases that create vulnerabilities and the way to detect them. Threats can come in many, many forms. Can come in a form of IP addresses that are known to be malicious, that are known to belong to Bitcoin miners, that are known to belong to command and control environments that used to penetrate organization. They can come in the form of user agent, web addresses, email addresses that are known for phishing. And all of these databases, we continuously correlate it with your logs as they come through the system. So whenever you see something or we detect something which is malicious, we know to alert it to you, and this is a connectivity and a correlation with these databases. We created a rule engine and correlation rules. This is something that we've added on top of the ELK. The ability to define your own rules and the ability to connect them to any devices, be it Slack or PagerDuty, your email is very critical. We've also created pre-made packages with hundreds of pre-made security rules, especially around cloud operations. So it's AWS, it's web servers like Apache and Nginx, it's SSH and connectivity, and many more devices that are needed. And for each one of them, we have a very wide realm of aspect of connectivity. If it can be access information, and it can be different type of login and stuff like that. And last but not least is that we've created ready-made compliance dashboard. We know that compliance is a major driver for security in organizations, and most organizations start their mission to security because of a compliance requirement. So we've created a ready-made dashboard for PCI, for SOC 2, for PCI, and for many other compliance requirements. And these come. All you need to do is connect your system to the relevant data sources, and these dashboard would work automatically. So when an audit comes, you will be able to first of all present a history of your adherence to compliance throughout the progress of the time, and also you'll be able to monitor in real time any compliance deviation and address it as they come along. So these are the things that we've implemented, and now I want to turn it over to Mike to run through the demo.
Thanks, Asaf. I appreciate you providing some background and some context for the security analytics tool. I want to spend a few minutes talking about how you can use off-the-shelf ELK or the security analytics tool that we've designed specifically to kind of go through a standard incident response workflow. For those of you who aren't familiar with incident response, most of the standards boil down to three basic concepts. The first of which is detection. The second of which is response, where ultimately you need to figure out where a particular attack or threat is extant in your environment. And then the last step is mitigation or lessons learned, where you need to be able to paint a comprehensive picture of where an attacker was and the actions that they performed in your environment. Across all three of those phases, it's critical to centralize your log data in one location so that you can get visibility into a timeline of where the attacker was, what systems or applications they touched, and what actions they performed. So I want to start by talking about the importance of collecting and centralizing data in really any tool, could be Logz.io, for example, and recommend some specific types of data that you'll want to collect. You'll want to ensure that you have visibility across your stack, because these days it's very unlikely that an attacker is only going to hit one part of your environment. Chances are pretty good that they're going to start in one location and then try to pivot or move laterally elsewhere before they reach their ultimate target. So to start with, for example, if you're using a cloud service like AWS to host your infrastructure, CloudTrail is an excellent place to start. And the reason for this is that CloudTrail essentially functions as an audit log at the AWS account level. So that's going to provide you with visibility into what users are doing, whether they're modifying permissions or making changes to underlying services or infrastructure. That data is a very rich source of security information that we would strongly recommend collecting as best practice for detecting malicious activity in your environment. Along the same lines, ELB, or really any type of access logs, whether you're running Nginx or Apache or IIS, are also a great way for you to be able to track the traffic that's hitting your applications and to see how users are interacting with those and from what locations or countries those applications are being accessed. I think we'd also recommend VPC flow logs, because where the ELB or the other types of access logs are going to provide you with visibility at the application layer, VPC is going to enrich the context that's already provided by those data sources by providing you with visibility into what's going on across the entirety of your virtual hosting environment. And you might also want to pull application events themselves depending on what you're logging from your custom applications. And in this case, we actually do provide out-of-the-box plugin libraries for applications. For example, if you have a Java application, we can provide you with a plugin library for Log4j2 that would allow you to configure and append or to ship data directly to us. You could also, of course, use Log4j2 to ship data to a standalone ELK cluster. And the majority of our AWS integrations, for example, pull directly from S3, so they're relatively easy to set up. Last but not least, in terms of granularity, you might also consider monitoring the endpoints themselves, because there's a lot that can go on at the endpoint or instance or server layer regarding unusual authentication activity, the presence of malware, changes to privilege or privilege escalation based attacks that can be easy to miss if you're taking a look just at the authentication service or broker layer. And you can get data in using a number of open source shippers, FileBeat, FluentD, WinLogBeat, or even Syslog to get that data into a centralized platform. One of the things that Asaf had mentioned previously was the kind of need to consolidate data where both operations and security can view it. And that's one of the benefits of the security analytics tool, where you'll notice that I'm actually able to just navigate from this operations view to a security view, so that you have the ability to leverage the data that you may already be sending to Logz.io from a security standpoint, where by navigating to the summary view, I can immediately be brought to a high-level overview of the threats that have been detected in the environment. And you'll notice that we provide a number of different visualizations to help you maintain that visibility from a security perspective. For example, you can see the number of hits associated with a given rule here in a heat map. We're also breaking these violations down by severity. We're giving you a number of the events that we've seen over time, as well as a table view, and then the underlying log events that are ultimately responsible for generating these visualizations. So it makes it very easy to see what's going on at any given moment in your environment. And you'll notice on this heat map that we're seeing a relatively high occurrence of IAM policy violations over a period of time. It's very easy to just click and drag over that relevant subset, and you'll see that we're going to create a filter that's going to impact the other visualizations that are present in this view. In addition to the IAM policy violations, I'm also seeing a series of multiple instances being started by an individual user. Now, this behavior in and of itself isn't inherently indicative of malicious activity, but it's definitely something that I want to take a look into going forward now that I've identified this threat. The next step is going to be to investigate it so that I can ultimately respond to it. But before I actually jump into the investigation, I want to talk a little bit about these rules, because it's all well and good that the security analytics tool is automatically surfacing these threats in your environment, but where are these detections coming from? So as Asaf had mentioned, we actually created over 100 pre-built correlation rules that are designed to detect a wide array of malicious activity. For example, authentication activity that might be unusual at both the service layer from a cloud-based service provider as well as at the endpoint level. Unusual activity that we're seeing in your Apache or Nginx logs, maybe relating to an enumeration attack. We can also identify misconfiguration issues as well that are going to be present and visible in the log data. So there's a whole plethora of different types of attacks the security analytics tool is able to provide out of the box, and that's going to be a core part of any incident response program, where at the bare minimum, you're going to need an automated system to automatically surface only those key events you care about that might pose a threat to your environment. So now that we've taken a look at the rules and some of the high-level visualizations, we want to drill down into the underlying log events and actually figure out why this is being raised and how can we pinpoint where it's located. So you'll notice that we actually have the ability to expand the events that are subject to this filter. And you'll notice that Logz.io has automatically enriched the data that has been sent in with a security context, indicating which feed triggered the alert as well as the type of threat, in this case, a malicious host. Okay, well, we've seen that it's identified a malicious host, but I want to know more about why that's the case to further our investigation. And to do that, I can navigate over to the threats component of Logz.io. So what we've done is integrate a number of open source threat feeds, and we've used them to automatically analyze your data and identify indicators of compromise. So what's going on behind the scenes when you send your logs to Logz.io is we're analyzing that data for the presence of external IPs and automatically correlating that with threats from some of the most reputable open source threat intelligence sources that exist today. For example, Alien Vault, Blocklist, Emerging Threats, among several others. And you can see that we've actually broken down those hits by feed. What's also going on for you behind the scenes from an enrichment perspective is that we're automatically performing GeoIP lookup work on the external IPs that are present in your log data. This allows you to track your traffic by country of origin. So for example, if you work for an organization that doesn't have any clients or personnel in Russia, but you see there's a lot of traffic originating from that country, that's something that's very suspicious and warrants further investigation. Just as you could with the summary dashboard, you also have the ability to create filters based on what you see here so that you can better pinpoint security events or incidents in your environment. For example, let's say that I only want to see my SEV3 threats. I can go ahead and create that filter, apply it, and we'll drill down to only those relevant events. I can even pin that filter to the filter bar here, and that's going to persist as I move about the interface and continue my investigation. It's also worth noting that the severity classification here is not actually being done by Logz.io. That's something that we're pulling in from these open source threat intelligence feeds so that you can be confident that the severity classification has been vetted out by other security practitioners in the open source space. So that's all well and good from an automatic correlative perspective that we're surfacing all these events. We're telling you where they're threats and why they're threats. But occasionally you will need to get your hands dirty with the log data. You might need a more granular view into a given chain of events to reconstruct what an attacker did or identify a live or active threat in your environment. And to do that, you can use this research view and the Discover tab to take advantage of the hopefully familiar power and capabilities of Kibana search leveraging the Lucene query syntax. You can actually see here that I've run a search, just a saved search that I created to capture failed logins, for example. And that's going to return the desired subset of data as expected. We'll expand one of those messages and see that it corresponds to a number of failed logins relating to a GitHub repository. So this might be something that I want to create a custom rule on, or even potentially visualize over time on a dashboard. And you can do that just as you would with standard Kibana, where I can see that time series, there's an unusual spike over a time period. I could save this, put it up on a dashboard, pipe it to a dedicated monitor, set it to auto refresh, and maintain near real-time visibility into the health and status of the environment from a security perspective. So now that I've spent some time giving you an overview of the security analytics tool and how you can use it to identify threats, investigate them further, and respond, as well as create some visualizations and reports for post-mortems, I actually want to turn things over to you, the audience, and take some time to address your questions. But before I do that, and actually while I take some time to prepare to address those questions, I do want to launch a second poll where I'd be interested to know what types of threats are the biggest concern to you. So I'm going to launch that poll now, and that'll be helpful for us to just get a sense of the threats that you're trying to capture in your day-to-day, or what you're most worried about being targeted by. And we'll give you guys just a few minutes to get up to about 70 or 80%. So we've got a representative sample to work with. Well, we're holding steady at 66%, so I think I'm comfortable closing out the poll for now. Let's see what we've got. The results are actually very interesting, where it really seems like everyone is more or less interested in detecting almost everything, or we have a pretty wide split where there's concerns about threats across the board. Really, we have a number of pre-built detections and dashboards that can help you track that across the entirety of your environment. We hope that you'll take a look at that in further detail down the line. What I'd like to do now, for those of you who want to remain, is we can spend some time addressing the questions that you guys have sent in. Let's see some of the questions. Just give me a moment to review. One of the questions I see here is, can you initiate tickets through ServiceNow's API? That's a great question, actually. Yes, we can. So this will actually address another question that I saw coming out as well, which was about whether you can create your own custom rules. So there's a couple of different ways that you can set up your own custom alerts. It's a standard workflow that you might be familiar with if you've used our operations platform. Or to go back to that example of failed logins. So now that I've got the results that I'm looking for, let's say I want to create an alert based on it, I can go ahead and create that custom rule, and we brought back to what may be a familiar screen for our current Logz.io customers. We have the ability to define a number of threshold-based alerts based on that pattern, where I could group the alert based on a specific number of users. So if I wanted to track failed login attempts by specific users, you have the ability to do that. So if you have somebody trying to SSH in the same account more than 5 times, maybe you want to get an alert based on that. And you can also set thresholds based on a straightforward number of events, as well as aggregate functions applied to your fields. So hopefully that answers the question we received about whether you can create custom rules. Yes, you absolutely can. In terms of the ServiceNow question, you do have the ability to send alerts to a number of different endpoints. So of course we do support just your standard email address, and that might be a viable option for ServiceNow, where you could set the ticket creation email address for ServiceNow as an endpoint. But it's also the case that we have out-of-the-box integrations with Big Panda, Datadog, PagerDuty, Slack, and VictorOps. We do give you the ability to send a custom webhook to an arbitrary endpoint, which you could also use with ServiceNow, where what Logz.io will do is send a structured JSON payload to an arbitrary endpoint of your choosing. And as long as that service can consume the payload in JSON format, you'll be good to go. So you have a lot of options in terms of the ability you have to send alerts to specific targets. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull from the next question that we see. How many of these alerting rule sets are provided by Logz.io out of the box? If so, are they frequently updated and extended? So right now we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 plus, maybe around 120, I think, for now. And the product is very new, so we're very interested in updating alerts pretty much as often as we can. And one of the nice things about working with us in the stage that we are at is that we are more than happy to partner with you to help design the rules that you need to detect key security events in your environment. So I think the term, how frequently are we updating these, pretty much as quickly as folks are asking for them at this point, in addition to the rules that we're providing based on our own research. And I think we'll do one or two more. There is one question about creating, let's see, reporting. That's what I see here. So I'll go ahead and pull that up now. Yes, I did mention it briefly, but you do have the ability to create custom reports in Logz.io as well. It is also the case that we have out-of-the-box dashboards, because I did see a question that we got in about compliance, and I didn't cover that as part of the presentation. But we do have a series of out-of-the-box dashboards focusing on, for example, GDPR, PCI, and I think we're working on SOC as well, and I can pull those up for you in just a moment. But yes, it is the case that we do have out-of-the-box dashboards designed to help you meet compliance requirements. And it is also the case that you can create your own based on the data that you're already sending in to us. So what I'll do for you now is pull up a GDPR dashboard that we've created out of the box. And that's actually something that we've done in conjunction with a tool called Wazoo, which you may or may not be familiar with. But essentially what it is a host-based intrusion detection system that can be used for a variety of purposes, for example, monitoring file integrity or actual attempts to gain access to a host. And you'll see that we here have an out-of-the-box dashboard focusing on various GDPR requirements, and we're actually automatically correlating the activity that we see in your log data with the specific GDPR controls or requirements. So this is something that you can get kind of at a glance visibility into, but it's also something that you could potentially export and provide to an auditor, or maybe just your supervisor to give them visibility into the health and status of your environment. And let's see, I'm going to do one more question, and then we'll probably wrap up a bit early. Will we support more security devices like firewall in order to get logs directly, devices like pfSense? So that's a good question. Yes, it's the case that you can definitely get those logs in today. And the way that you would typically do so is just by leveraging the syslog module from something like a pfSense or a Cisco ASA. Essentially, if you have a tool that has the ability to write logs to a text-based file, or to open up a connection over TCP or UDP and write to it, you have a very good chance of getting that data into Logz.io and having us parse it out for you. So the big focus of kind of the presentation today and the product is kind of on a cloud-based production environment, but you could absolutely get us data from DNS servers, from your firewall appliances, from vulnerability managers or scanners, get that data into Logz.io and centralize it there. So I think that's going to do it for the majority of the questions that we have today. There was a question I see about how do we enable the security tool. That is a great question. So if it's the case that you want to get access to the security tool, there is a link on our website that you can use to request more information. I'll go ahead and pull that up for you now. You can see here that if you just go to the home page here, you can learn more about the security analytics tool. You can request a demonstration. It's also the case that you can feel free to speak with support either via chat or by sending an email to help@logz.io, and we'll work with you to set up a trial for the tool. So please do feel free to let us know, and you can also feel free to reach out to your customer success engineer. So for those of you who know me personally, I see a few of you on the meeting today, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to work with you to get this enabled. So thank you everyone for, actually I suppose before we wrap up, there will be one last poll as our VP of Customer Success, Boaz, helpfully reminded me. And I am curious to know, who's responsible for managing security incidents at your company? I think we're kind of seeing these days that there's not too many dedicated security personnel or practitioners out there. So kind of interested to see what the split looks like among the attendees today. And as well, while you're continuing to vote, it wouldn't be a Logz.io webinar without a fun t-shirt related challenge. Be very interested to know what you'd like to see for our next webinar, particularly with a security focus. What are you looking for guidance on from a security perspective, whether that's threat hunting or other security related topics? If you can send an email to help@Logz.io this week with a suggestion for the topic of our next webinar, we'll be happy to send you a free t-shirt for your trouble. We're almost at 60%, and I think that'll probably be a good place to stop. Just need 1 or 2 more votes. I know you guys can do it. Well, the perfect is the enemy of the good, so we'll go ahead and share that out. So it seems like there's a pretty good split where some of you have actually dedicated SOC teams, but the majority of you are either having your security incidents managed by the operations or the DevOps folks, or you have a dedicated InfoSec team. So that's pretty interesting that we see that split, and it's not that uncommon. So that aligns with our goal of providing a centralized place where you can view both your security and operations data and manage it all by shipping the same data to the same places. So thanks very much, everyone, for taking the time to attend. Hope this was enjoyable for you and spending some time to chat with us about our security analytics tool, as well as how you can use it in incident response. We hope very much to see you at our next webinar. Thanks again.